folks, letting them know about the project goals. So our first goal as the City of Boston is to improve pedestrian safety along Blue Hill Avenue. We have heard from folks that the sidewalks need to be in better condition, that there should be more crosswalks, and that generally there are lots of improvements the city could make in terms of making it easier and more joyful to walk along Blue Hill Avenue. So that's goal number one. Goal number two from the city's perspective is to expand the transportation options available to people traveling Blue Hill Avenue and the reliability of each of those. Today, Blue Hill Avenue, it can vary widely how long it takes to travel from one end to the other, no matter what mode you take. And so what we'd like to look at through this project is how can we give people greater freedom of choice in terms of making it easier to choose from taking the bus, from driving a car, from biking, from walking, and making all of those options safe and reliable. And then goal number three is to make sure that throughout this project, even though we're talking about transportation at the heart of this, transportation is a connector. It connects people to housing, it connects people to jobs. And so we want to focus on how we can connect the work we're doing here to other investments by city departments and state agencies, including across things like environmental resilience and enhancing the public realm on Blue Hill Avenue. So for the meeting goals, what we'll specifically be talking about today, our first goal is to let everybody at this meeting sort of know where the project came from, who's involved, and why we are trying to approach this process differently than what you might have seen from other city projects. Our second goal is to provide you all with updates about how the planning studies and engagement activities we're conducting along Blue Hill Avenue, or BHA, are going and how to get involved in those. The third update is to share some data updates and respond to common questions we're hearing about transportation and bus service along Blue Hill Avenue. And then finally, our fourth goal is to make sure that we're connecting public meeting feedback we receive here with the other forms of engagement that we're pursuing along the corridor for this project. And I will pass it to Shavella.
Thank you, Kirsty. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shavella Lee Pacheco, and I'm the co-founder of Consult Leela. Before we get started, I just wanted to lay some ground rules for us to keep in mind during this meeting. The first is to maintain respect for others in this space. Transportation planning can be a contentious conversation, and we're committed to respecting your experiences and your thoughts and opinions as residents. I'm asking that you also extend that respect to the community members, municipal agencies, and consultants, but also that you extend that to each other. There are different residents here with different experiences, different needs and wants. So we do ask that even in the chat that you're please being respectful and allowing others to voice their opinions. We also ask that you use I statements, just sharing what your experience is. If you are representing a neighborhood association or group, just please let us know that when you speak and when you share that we. Our third ground rule is step up and step back. So if you can, please share, allow others to speak. If you're someone who doesn't speak often, just step up, share what your experience is on Blue Hill Ave, even if it's as a private message. And if you're someone who's, speaking a lot and offering your thoughts and opinions, if you could just take a moment to step back and allow others to speak. And the fourth is there are going to be a good amount of time for reaction and discussions at the end. So please try to limit your questions until then. Thank you.
Okay. So first of all, we'd like to get an idea for who was able to join us tonight. So we have a little bit of an intro poll, which I will launch now. Great. So if you could just answer, what is your main way of traveling along Blue Hill Avenue, whether that's by bike, by bus or train, driving, walking, or other? If you'd like, you can tell us a bit about why that's how you choose to get around on Blue Hill Avenue. And then finally, we would, if you're willing to share, would like to know your home zip code so we can know geographically who's attending the meeting tonight. And I will pause while those results come in. And while folks are answering, I did see a question in the chat about whether or not these meeting slides will be shared. Yes. In the days following this meeting, we will make sure to share links to both the meeting recording as well as copies of the slides so that everyone has access to those. And they will be available on boston.gov/Blue Hill Avenue. I see answers are still coming in. Okay. And we'll share these results back so you can see. So right now it's looking like we have 68% of, climbing to 69% of folks in this room primarily drive, about 15 to 20% who take the bus or train, around 10% who bike, between 5 and 10% who walk, and then no one has selected other. Okay. I'm going to end the poll, but I will share the results so that you all can also see those percentages. And we will also share these in the meeting notes following the meeting. All righty, next slide. So meet the team and project overview. So I'm going to introduce the public sector, or the government portion of our team. So this project is being led by myself and Charlotte Fleetwood in the Boston Transportation Department. We also have a number of other city departments that we're working with, many of whom you can see listed here. What we've done on this project is we've actually established specific liaisons or point people in each of these departments in order to do two things. The first is to make sure that we are communicating feedback we get to each other, because we know that, transportation is related to all of these other things. And so we want to make sure that information is being shared to the appropriate folks who can act on it. The other thing is that we want to make sure any projects that are going on across the city that relate to Blue Hill Avenue and the communities that it serves are being coordinated so that you all are getting sort of that your feedback is having the maximum impact possible, and that we're all working towards the same goals that we hear from you. In addition, we're joined by a number of folks from our state partners. So you'll see MBTA is a big organization. So we have a number of people who are helping us across different MBTA departments, including capital delivery, as well as transit priority. And then we also have a representative from MassDOT District 6. So that includes Blue Hill Avenue in Boston, to make sure that we're staying coordinated with those agencies as well. And additionally, we've begun meeting with the Department of Conservation and Recreation. The Neponset River Greenway is an amazing resource and they control that. So we want to make sure that we're coordinated with them as well. And with that, I will pass it off to Alyssa to introduce the rest of the team.
Thanks, Kirsty. Evening, everyone. My name's Alyssa Michelle, and we're going to take a little bit of time to introduce you to the engagement team. So the team working on engagement for this project is a makeup of multiple agencies and practices. We have Grayscale Collaborative, which includes Stephen Gray, Ann Lynn, and Caroline Phyllis Smith, myself with my organization, Powerful Pathways, Jeff Rosenblum with Tool Design Group, Consult Leela, which includes Ishmael Hazelwood and Chevelle Lee Pacheco, and Caesar McDowell of Real Talk for Change and MIT. We also are working closely with community partners, of which that will continue to grow. Currently, we're working with Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition, the Greater Mattapan Neighborhood Council, Morningstar Baptist Church, and Mattapan Main Streets. And again, we have sent out invitations to a number of other stakeholder groups that we have invited to be part of these processes and are folding them in as well. In terms of public agencies, of course, this is a Boston Transportation Department project, but as Kirsty mentioned, we're working across multiple other city agencies as well. They're not listed here, but that includes the BPDA, the Boston Planning and Development Agency, New Urban Mechanics, Public Works, the Environment Department, and others. And so far, we had started this process by doing some initial conversations and putting feelers out there, so to speak. And we had meetings with the Garrison Charter Neighborhood Association, Greater Grove Hall Main Streets, Project Right, Franklin Park Coalition, the Mattapan Teen Center, Prince Hall Grand Large, the Mattapan Community Health Center, Franklin Park Zoo, and a number of individual community leaders as well. Next slide, please. So where and how are we working? Well, to begin with, this process is a continuation of the project which began in 2019. And including that, so far there have been 20 public meetings about Blue Hill Avenue or Mattapan Square. Mattapan Square was undergoing its own redesign process, which has been folded into Blue Hill Avenue. So some of you may have come to this meeting from that space as well. We had 14 workshops. We have had 11 in-person pop-ups, and there'll be plenty more on the way. We also sent out a mailer to everyone who lives within a half-mile radius of the Blue Hill Avenue corridor. We've organized 3 community walks and also are looking to do more community walks. And we have issued over 500 surveys, or at least received over 500 responses to our surveys. How are we working differently? Well, for one thing, this is a very large and diverse group working on community engagement, as you can tell. And we are taking on a holistic approach to Blue Hill Avenue, working inclusively with community groups and people who live and work along the corridor and in the neighborhoods. We recognize and are looking at this as not just transportation, because we know that you can't talk about transportation without talking about housing, without talking about jobs, without talking about small business opportunity, without talking about environment. And so this is a very inclusive and intersectional process. So this means that we're also looking at a number of things simultaneously, such as the Blue Hill Avenue Action Plan, which are the number of development projects that are part of the Office of Housing. We're also working really closely with the city's Office of Small Business Development and connecting with coalitions that are focused on employment, anti-displacement, and many other things as well. Next slide, please. So we've been asking stakeholders in the workshops that we've been holding to give us feedback on not just how they would like to see changes along Blue Hill Avenue, but who are people that we should be talking to. And so in previous sessions that we began last year in the fall, we have heard thus far as recommendations that we should be talking to residents of public housing, to seniors, to families with young children, to youth and students, businesses and shoppers, churches, health centers, developers and building owners, and people who utilize different forms of transit, like bicyclists, drivers, and bus riders as a whole. We also are asking questions from you, like, what does success look like? This really is an inclusive process, and we're doing our best to make it as inclusive as possible. And we're asking questions like, how do we center quality of life, health, and safety? Those are the top issues that we hear from the community thus far as major issues, areas of concern. How do we make sure that we're addressing the heat islands? So we've been examining the amount of trees and tree canopies along Blue Hill Avenue, air quality, pedestrian safety, access to green space. And we also, of course, as this is a transit project, want to make sure that we're approaching this redesign process so that we're creating convenient and reliable access to businesses, services, and cultural centers. We want to make a quick note that one size does not fit all for Blue Hill Avenue. We know that different people are interested in different things along this corridor because different people use Blue Hill Avenue very differently. And as a result, we're trying to find how do we come up with the best solutions to support everyone. So how can we tailor changed to meet the particular needs of local residents and patrons and folks who live, work, and play along the corridor. Next slide, please. So some of the things we've been hearing as feedback thus far, these are just a few examples of a myriad of documents we've collected of note taking. So we've heard things like, what would make Blue Hill Avenue better? Like traffic calming, parking enforcement, financial incentives to leave the car at home, sometimes getting a smoother road surface in areas where there maybe broken road infrastructure. And people have also talked about not just the commute itself, but where are we going to along the commute? So looking for more things like nice cafes and restaurants and patios, seating area, like outdoor seating, and areas where people can really enjoy the neighborhoods. We've heard things like wanting for medians along the length of Blue Hill Ave that are pretty vast in rerouting traffic. So it might make a smoother commute during morning and evening rush hours. We've heard things like, we've also heard other kinds of feedback as well, like center running bus lanes are going to cause more traffic. A lot of comparisons to what is on Columbus Avenue right now. And we've heard that there's a lot of feelings, particularly from motorists, about concerns about that kind of a redesign. So we are listening and hearing that. And we love to go to Franklin Park, as a lot of folks have been saying, but getting there is quite scary. The driving experience really needs to change for motorists, but we've also heard that the driving experience needs to change for bicyclists and for folks who ride the bus routes as well. So I'm going to pass it now to Stephen, who's going to talk a little bit more about public comments and commitments.
Thanks, Alenza. Yeah, my name is Stephen Gray, again with Grayscale Collaborative, one of the consulting firms on this team. One of the things I think that we were clear about when we decided to work on this project was that this process, this engagement process, needed to be something that was genuine and reflect the interests and needs and desires of folks living in Mattapan along this corridor. And so that's a very diverse group of people in terms of your backgrounds, in terms of your resources, in terms of the things that you rely upon in your neighborhood, in terms of your interests. And so it was important that as we went through this process, we weren't just documenting information and just going to deliver a report, but that we were working with the city to actually make some commitments publicly along the way so that folks can see their feedback reflected in real time and be able to trust and refer to these public commitments in a way that keeps the city honest and then keeps us all also honest about the things that we've been discussing and that the city has committed to. So I'm going to talk a little bit about 3 commitments that the city and engagement team are making today as a result of this process so far, and then hand it off to Andrew, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the data that's been requested, knowing that we have other data that is in the works that we're gathering and deciphering. So the first public commitment is actually about data and process. So the city and engagement team are committed to making informed, data-driven decisions which respond to questions raised by the public. A lot of things have been pointed to that people are concerned about. One in particular is the changes along Columbus Ave as an example of something that some people are concerned might not have been a benefit in some ways. And so one of the things that this team is committed to doing is doing a post-implementation study, which is currently underway, of Columbus Avenue, so that we can really get down to what the impacts are, address those impacts in real time with Columbus Avenue so that we're not creating situations that are potentially detrimental again, but that we're also getting the information that tells us what we need to address and how we can do it in the best way possible. Another study is a housing impact study. There's always valid concerns about public investments in infrastructure that can lead to rising cost of housing. because developers get interested in the community. Other folks get interested that weren't interested before because now they're better connected to the rest of the city potentially. And then that drives up rents and it drives up property values, which on the one hand could be positive, but on the other hand, it increases taxes potentially. And so we really want to make sure that we're looking at the impacts on housing that this is going to have. And so there's a commitment to a housing study, which is being co-led by the Mayor's Office of Housing and MAPC. A third is a parking study. We all know that the parking situation along Blue Hill Ave can sometimes be a little bit like the Wild West. And sometimes it can be like a desert where you can't find a place, or you found a place, but every place that people found is not necessarily legal and legit parking. And so we want to make sure we understand the current parking demand, the way that that demand is being met currently, and then take into consideration that where there are places where double and triple parking is happening, we understand that that is perhaps not the best way to be occupying the street, but all of those spots are legitimately needed spots. And so how do we make sure that we are finding spaces for the spaces that are needed as we're making any changes to the street section? So those are 3 studies that the city, through this process and through the feedback so far, are committed to doing in conjunction with any redesign, so that that's a data-informed process. And we'll focus on some of these topics in upcoming meetings as the data becomes more readily available. If you have additional questions that you would like to sort of have us look into and put on the sort of list of FAQs, there's a Google form, and if someone could paste that into the chat, that would be really helpful. And that's where a lot of these ideas and thoughts that Alenza was referring. Computer slow. Are you all able to see the next slide, or has it advanced yet?
Yes, now we can see the next slide.
Okay. The next public commitment is to pedestrian safety investments. So here the city and engagement team are committed to improving pedestrian safety along Blue Hill Avenue. What we've heard a lot from folks is that it's not just about the transportation service, which is something that needs to be addressed and improved, but it's also just crumbling sidewalks and roadways, poor timing on signals for crossing and for driving, and other issues that people are running into on a daily basis. I think it's important. I think this hopefully will resonate with people who are trying to figure out if they are on board with this process and project or not on board with it. This does not have to include center running bus lanes. The language that we're using here is very important. It doesn't have to include center running bus lanes. The city does have an opinion about the benefits of bus priority and potentially center running bus lanes. So that is true and truthful. But the city is also committed to only spend public money on a project that has broad public support. And so that means that investment in infrastructure improvements along Blue Hill Avenue will happen no matter what folks decide at the end of the day, center running bus lanes or not. And that the exact nature of the design will be determined through sustained and varied engagement for those who live, work, play, and pray along Blue Hill Avenue. There are implications to different funding sources that are beyond the city's control if bus priority is not a part of the project. So we should keep in mind that the scale of what the city will need to raise changes depending on if that's involved. But center running bus lanes are not what this project is. They're just one possible element that could be included in this project. Next slide, please. And the next public commitment is about community funding. The city and engagement team believe that public funding for this project should be allocated based on public priorities. This means that the city will regularly share data and engagement updates. That's our monthly meeting that we're having from now at least until through July. And we will be transparent about the city's decision-making on the framework for design and implementation. This also means that the city will provide diverse and accessible opportunities to connect with the project team, both virtually, in person, and survey-based. And so here is a list of some of the activities that are going to be getting started in February and moving through the spring, summer, and into the fall even. Real talk sessions, which will be in-depth, intimate conversations about Blue Hill Avenue. These will be small group conversations. Weekly drop-in hours at the Mattapan Station and Grove Hall. Monthly public meetings through July, that's this meeting that we're at tonight. Bus rider surveys on routes along Blue Hill Avenue. This will be intercept surveys where people will be in person riding the bus and talking with bus riders in real time. Business surveys along Blue Hill Avenue. And youth-focused learning and engagement workshops as well to get the next generation of folks civically engaged and thinking about the environment that they're going to inherit, as well as interactive and informational exhibits. So these are the kinds of activities that we really hope that folks will get involved with. This monthly meeting is a meeting for us to kind of get a general pulse of things and to share back data and information based upon questions and concerns that have come up throughout the process. But there are a lot of other ways that we're hoping to be able to connect with you and others in much more direct ways, meeting folks exactly where they are. Next slide. So I'm going to pass it to Jeff to ask a couple of poll questions.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. Can everyone hear me okay? Excellent. My name is Jeff Rosenblum. I work for a consulting firm, Tool Design Group, and I'm excited to be working with this team and with the city and the MBTA to try to figure out what we should be doing. We have been asking questions for a while now about what people are wanting and what people are concerned about. So there are two slides that we're going to ask some questions on, but what we're highlighting in these two, this slide is talking about concerns. The next one will be about what people want on the corridor. These are some of the things that we've heard, or the key things that we've heard. So we want to get a sense of, from what we've heard, which of the things are most important to you, or which are the things that are most concerning to you? So we can, oops. All right, so here are A through E. These are things that people have listed as their concerns. And if you can use the poll to give us a sense of the biggest concern, most people might have multiple concerns, which is fine. We just want to get a sense of your biggest concern. And then if you don't have a concern, if you have a concern that isn't listed here, feel free to type it into the chat. Give people some time to do that. So we have 86 folks here. There's a bunch of people from the city, MBTA, and consultants, so we won't count them, but about 50 people have filled out the poll. People are still entering things, so I'm going to wait another few seconds. All right, so if all goes well, everybody can see the results. Can someone tell me if that is true? Great. All right, so it looks like so far, of what we've been hearing, there's a lot of the concerns that we've already been hearing are ones that people here also are thinking about. And there's a few more that people are going to enter into the chat, which is great. At the end of this presentation, Kirsty is going to share a link so additional feedback can be provided on any of these concerns and opportunities after the meeting and from other folks. So this does not have to be limited to this meeting itself. All right, and we can move on to the next slide. So benefits. A lot of people have been asking for a long time, potentially even decades, for improvements to be happening on Blue Hill Avenue. And the questioning that we've been doing, both from these meetings as well as talking to people on the street and the interviews and going door to door, for what we've heard so far in this process, is these are the things that people want as benefits for a reconstructed Blue Hill Avenue. So here's A through E, and I can launch that poll. And again, if there are things you want to see through this project or through anything that you want to happen along Blue Hill Avenue in this area, and it's not listed here, entering into the chat would be great. And again, we will provide a link to a feedback mechanism that you can use outside of this meeting and that you can share with others. I've been told that Kenya does not appreciate it when people don't do the polls. That's what she told me. So everyone should do the poll. All right, so hopefully everyone can see the result. And I think that this does show that a lot of the things that we've already heard are the things on this list that you folks are agreeing with. Those who have ideas for what should happen in the area that put my ideas listed, hopefully can put it in the chat, or you can use a link that we're going to provide at the end to provide feedback after the meeting. Great. With that, we can move on to the next section.
Thanks, Jeff. Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew McFarland, and I'm a project manager for the MBTA's Transit Priority Program. So tonight, I'm just going to walk through some slides that address some of the questions that we've heard from all of you over the last few months regarding MBTA service along the Ave. Next slide, Caroline. Cool. So one of the first questions that we get from a lot of folks is, how do you expect folks to choose the bus if it's not reliable? We know that this is a major challenge for the MBTA across the system, not just on Blue Hill Ave. But we know that the main source of unreliability for Blue Hill Ave is delay due to congestion. So MBTA buses are often stuck in congestion. On any given trip, a bus might be stuck in traffic for a few minutes, but the total human cost of delay for people on that bus is much, much greater, especially when we consider the thousands and thousands of people who rely on MBTA buses on Blue Hill Ave every single day. So MBTA estimates that collectively, MBTA bus riders lose about 3,000 person hours, so personal hours that they could have spent in the classroom or at work or at home with their families, stuck on the bus due to this delay. So this is one of the main reasons why the MBTA and the city of Boston are advocating for center running bus lanes along Blue Hill Ave. We believe this will speed up the bus and make it much more reliable, removing buses from traffic and making sure that we can get you to wherever you need to go. We estimate that if center running bus lanes are built on Blue Hill Ave, we can reduce the transit travel time significantly along the corridor, meaning that could take as few as 15 minutes to travel from Mattapan Square all the way to Grove Hall by bus. Next slide, please. So prioritizing the bus with bus lanes is essential for better transit on Blue Hill Ave, but the MBTA is also planning to bring a lot more service to the corridor overall in the near future. So over the next 5 years, the MBTA will be implementing our bus network redesign plan. This includes a 25% increase in service all across the system, and Blue Hill Ave will be seeing a significant portion of that increase. So for instance, in Grove Hall alone, MBTA estimates that we could see an overall increase of almost 200 bus trips per day in the area that's right around the Grove Hall Mecca. Additionally, we're planning on offering more bus service throughout the entire service day. So more bus trips earlier in the morning, in the middle of the day, and later into the evening, not just during the traditional 9 to 5 travel commute periods. Overall, this would mean a lot of Blue Hill Ave would see much better service in the next 5 years. And this could also result in just better frequency of service throughout the entire day. So we estimate that during like the peak or kind of the busiest periods of the day, most of the corridor would see a bus every 3 to 6 minutes on average. Next slide, please. And finally, we often talked about how public transit allows people to travel along or through Blue Hill Ave. But we know that's also really important for getting folks to all the different destinations along Blue Hill Ave itself, especially small businesses. So in Mattapan, for instance, about 12,000 bus riders are getting on and off the bus during the weekday. All those folks are folks who likely live in the area, but also they could be people who work in the small businesses in Mattapan Square or in other places. And it's also an important part of making folks able to get to these destinations by transit and by foot. And over by the Grove Hall Mecca, we estimate that there are about 5,500 riders who are getting on and off the bus each weekday. So we see bus service as a critical part of increasing the vibrancy and making folks connected to the city around them. There's a significant portion of folks who live along Blue Hill Ave who currently do not have access to a car. So this is also really important to consider. So between 20% to 50%, depending on where you are on the corridor, people do not have access to a car in the area. So really trying to make sure that we're improving public transit is really key for making folks have better connections to the rest of the city. With that, you can go to the next slide, please. I'll pass it back to Jeff, I believe.
All right. Question about how everybody, no. How many other people are in the same vehicle with you? People can take. All right, so these are the results from this poll, which shows that a lot of people are riding with other people. And about a third of people who are driving travel alone. And then the guess would be the 3 or more are either with families or on the bus, since I guess it wasn't an easy distinguishing factor there. All right, next slide. And pass to you, Kirsty.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening, for participating in the polls. This is all really helpful information for us to gather, and all of the additions in the chat really also help to give color to what we've been hearing so far. I did want to pull out one thing that we heard in the chat was, you know, are we really listening? And I hope that through these meetings, we can convey to you that, yes, we are listening. The community will be accountable to this community process and the feedback we gather, not only here, but in all the other ways that we are engaging with folks and collecting feedback. I'm always happy to talk to folks. We'll get to my contact information in a minute. You can leave me a voicemail and I will call you back. I want to convey that we really are trying to pursue this process in a community-centered way, where we're being led by the voices of the community, where we're being led by community-based engagement consultants. I will likely not always be perfect in that role of managing this process, but I guarantee and I promise to you all that I will do my best, that I will always be open to feedback, and that I am excited to talk to each and every one of you that wants to engage with the project. So with that, in addition to talking to me or talking to others on this team, there are some other ways to get involved. If we can move to the next slide. Oh, if we can go back one. So as I mentioned, we are really looking to get folks involved in this process. And so I'm going to launch our last poll, which is just, would you like to be involved in other engagement activities? If you select yes or maybe, we may reach out to you with more information about upcoming engagement and opportunities to get involved. And I'm seeing a lot of yeses and a lot of maybes, which makes me really happy. Fantastic. So I'll leave that open for a little bit longer because I'm still seeing folks respond, and I want to make sure that everybody who's interested has an opportunity to answer. Some of the activities that we have coming up while folks are answering the poll, we'll be partnering with a group out of MIT actually to do what are called real talk sessions. We're excited to talk with folks more about that, but basically these are in-depth, intimate conversations about Blue Hill Avenue, where we can really dive into some of the intricacies around how people use Blue Hill Avenue, what concerns they have about the way it works today, what they'd like to see in the future, and sort of what they feel like that could mean for them personally. And so we'll be able to share that information that we collect with other folks, including people who attend these meetings. As mentioned before, we'll have weekly drop-in hours. So we currently have those going on in Mattapan, at Mattapan Station. So in the community room at Mattapan Station, every Thursday from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Am I right on that, Andrew and Charlotte? Fantastic. We also often have members from our Office of Economic Opportunity and Inclusion there. And it looks like we'll be able to partner with another part of the MBTA to have folks from the Mattapan Line Transformation team there too, so that it can really be a one-stop shop for any questions you might have about things going on in Mattapan. Additionally, we're looking for a Grove Hall location. We have a lead, but are still confirming that we can get that spot every week. I myself will be there. for at least 2 hours each week for people to drop in, ask questions along the corridor, and I will send out that information by email to everyone who attended this meeting tonight, as well as everyone signed up for our newsletter, and as soon as we get that established. Again, we have monthly public meetings through July. If you registered for tonight, you're already registered for every meeting through July. You should get that information. It'll be the same login each time. So we hope to see you at future events. As we mentioned too, we're looking to do a bus rider survey. So if you're interested in that, let us know. We'll be surveying all the businesses along Blue Hill Avenue to make sure we understand how they interact with the street. We want to make sure that the small businesses along Blue Hill Avenue can continue thriving and serving their communities. And then finally, we have youth-focused learning and engagement workshops, and we should have some more details on those soon that we're excited to share, as well as some interactive and informational exhibits that really help to get people immersed in sort of the questions that we're asking you all and be a little bit more hands-on. Okay, and with that, I'm going to end the poll. And as you can see, a very involved group. So really looking forward to reaching out to folks. Thank you so much for indicating your interest. So how do you stay connected? There are a couple of different ways to keep in touch with the folks on this project. If you call 617-635-3944, that'll go directly to our feedback line for Blue Hill Avenue. That's something that I try to check every day, at least multiple times a week. So you can always leave a voicemail and I can give you a call back. The best place to find the most up-to-date information about the project is boston.gov/Blue Hill Avenue. And we're working on making that website a little bit more user-friendly, so stay tuned for some updates. If you want to get in touch, you can email bluehillav@boston.gov. I also monitor that email inbox every day. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you have concerns, if you want to chat, absolutely open to that. And if there are other questions that you have, we have a question form that our engagement consultants put together to make sure we're documenting those. And that's where a lot of the questions that you've seen so far have come back or have come through. Alrighty. So we do have a little bit of extra time in the meeting. If folks wanted to add anything in the chat that they'd like to discuss, but if not, we can respect everybody's time and end a little early. Yes, Mr. Lisa, I can look at the chat questions. And Andre, let's hear from you first. So I'm asking you to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So I'm a resident of Dorchester. I just wanted to say I support the center running bus lanes, not only for the direct benefits that it will have for pedestrian safety, for ridership, for more reliable transit options, but also because this sets a really good groundwork for future expansions, perhaps of light rail. The area around Blue Hill Avenue is a population that could support light rail. I understand that it's not in the budget, that is not within the the realm of this current project, but given the way things are going, it is very obvious for some of us young folk that designing your city around cars is not sustainable. A lot of us are looking to live car-free and to have more transit options, and especially in the future, would be beneficial not only for the riders, but for the community as a whole. We've seen from other cities and especially from around like Europe, for example, that the more you focus on pedestrians and on transit, the better the community is in terms of like even revenue for local businesses. I do think that it's not perfect. There's obviously issues of gentrification, of parking, of double parking, and I do think that there are things we could focus on, we should focus on, but I still think getting the center running bus lanes is an absolute boon for the community. So,
Thank you for your comment. Let's see. I also see some questions in the chat. So, Ms. Critchlow, great to hear from you. There's a question, can the MBTA and BTD figure out a way to ticket and tow cars blocking bus stops? Safety of riders getting on the buses from the curb is most important. Ms. Critchlow, it's a great question and a great comment. As you said, when the bus can't fully pull up to the sidewalk, what that means is anybody who uses a wheelchair, who has a stroller, who uses a walker, can't safely get on and off the bus. And sometimes people literally can't get off the bus because it's just too big of a step. So the MBTA and BTD are both collaborating on looking from a holistic perspective at our enforcement policies and also our enforcement personnel. As you might have heard, we are a little short-staffed here at the city across various departments, and that includes our enforcement staff. But definitely noted that that is a topic of conversation folks are interested in talking about. And as we have updates from the city side, we will definitely convey those in this meeting. Let's see. There were also some questions about, oh, yes, timeline. So the timeline for this project has not changed. There are some things that we are keeping in mind. So in order formally to keep the federal funding for this project, we need to be have a full design by end of September of next year. However, the city is committed to incorporating public feedback and going through this process as long as is necessary. So we will work with you all. We will keep you updated on that front. We will devote as much time as we need to in order to make sure that we really feel like we have gotten comprehensive feedback from the people who live, work, play, and pray along Blue Hole Avenue. Mr. Elisa, I will ask you to unmute. Okay.
Thank you, and appreciate you folks coming out tonight. It's not snowing, so it's a good night to be in. I wrote most of this in the chat, but I don't know if you'll get to them. The first and primary question that we've been asking for about 4 years, maybe more. If the primary goal of people riding Blue Hole Avenue on transit is to get to rapid transit, to get to a rapid transit line, what is the purpose or benefit of a line that starts in Mattapan and ends at Grove Hall? Before you answer that, the question that I had that followed it was, you know, when you get to Grove Hall, then what? And that means where's the turnaround? What property has to be lost? What businesses have to go away for there to be a turnaround? I mean, what is the system that's going to be effective there? And then, you know, I put some other things in the chat, but the primary question is Mattapan Square to Grove Hall, then what? What is the long-term plan? Or is that the essence of what we're trying to do? And then the question be, why?
Excellent question, Mr. Lisa. Andrew McFarland from the MBTA, if you want to elaborate, please feel free to hop in here. So the buses that travel Blue Hill Avenue, there are a lot. There are a lot of routes, and they sort of enter and exit Blue Hill Avenue at various times. But a lot of the ones that do continue all the way towards Grove Hall continue on Warren Street up to Nubian Station and then over to Ruggles Station. So that's where the, you know, rapid transit connection is made, so to speak. I would say that, you know, one of the goals of this project and one of the reasons why the city supports a center running bus lane is because we think that if done well and if done right, a center running bus lane can get us pretty darn close to the quality of subway. It won't match it, you know, bus can't match underground subway, but we want to provide the highest possible quality of service, of bus service on Blue Hill Avenue that we possibly can.
Christy, you're only getting us to Grove Hall unless you're telling me that you're going to make Grove Hall a terminus, and that the buses that run down Warren Street and the buses that run down Seaver and the buses that run down, continue down Blue Hill Avenue will pick up at Grove Hall. I mean, we're discussing Grove Hall, Mattapan Square. Where, when we get to Mattapan Square, what happens?
Yes.
With the bus lane.
Great question. So in Mattapan Square, they would turn left into Mattapan Station, and that would sort of be the terminus of the bus routes under what's proposed under bus network redesign. So that's, in terms of buses coming down a majority of Blue Hill Avenue, that's the 28 and the 29. So they would end at Mattapan Station. Going north, those buses, instead of stopping in Grove Hall, like there would be a stop to pick up and drop off riders, but they would actually just continue going up Warren Street to Nubian Station, stop there as a major stop, and then continue across Malcolm X Boulevard and then up Columbus Tremont to Ruggles Station. So Ruggles Station would still be sort of the official terminus for a lot of the buses traveling on Blue Hill Avenue, and then Mattapan Station on the southern end. Is that answering your question?
No, ma'am. The
Okay.
center line bus lane we're talking about, because
Yes.
somebody mentioned light rail also. I mean, it's great thinkers who've been in Europe, but the idea that if there's a particular bus that is running center line,
Yes.
is that bus continuing down Warren Street or switching off at Blue Hill, which is Seaver, which is a faster route to Jackson, or are they continuing down Blue Hill past Grove Hall? We're only talking about Mattapan Square to Grove Hall. Is Grove Hall a terminus?
Grove Hall is not a terminus. All of the buses would continue with the movements that they do today. I have a feeling that I'm not describing this well, so I'm going to take this as a to-do item for the next meeting, and also a resource we can post on the website to sort of show visually what I'm talking about. And we also have some resources from the MBTA and the bus network redesign team. But so buses would continue as they do. So if you're on the 28 today, it would use the center running facility all the way to Grove Hall, and then it would switch to its current operation where it runs along the side like many bus routes inside the city of Boston do. So there would be sort of a transition point from going from the bus operating in a center running facility to running just as it does today on Warren Street. And that would be the same for any buses that use any portion of Blue Hill Avenue. So while on Blue Hill Avenue, they would be able to use the center running bus lanes and the center running bus platforms. And then as they turn off, we would make sure that there's our dedicated points where they can do that to run their routes. And then they would run as they do today on the other streets.
Okay, and coming back up, they would then join at Grove Hall in the center lane.
Correct. Yes.
Right. So I guess the last statement, I'm sorry to take so much of your time. The last statement is, there's some other questions, but the last statement would be that until you can guarantee or commit to fixing Chapter 90 enforcement, nothing is going to work. We saw a little bit on the Silver Line and it worked for a little while, but MBTA officers and short staff, whatever it is, we're now getting real problems and clogs along Washington Street. And the challenge that we've had for bus transportation, at least for the last 40 some years that I've been here, has been the enforcement of Chapter 90. If people double park, if they run red lights, if they clog the intersection, if there's no enforcement, I don't care what we put there, it's not going to work.
It's a great point, Mr. Lisa. Thank you for raising it. And just again, this is great feedback because this shows that we need to devote some time to talking about enforcement and a deeper conversation. So we'll make sure we do that in the future.
And if I could just add, trust when I tell you, Mr. Lewis, this is Kenya, your favorite girl's name. We've been having these conversations around enforcement. We had one just as recent as yesterday, and we continue to do so. So I just want to reiterate that everything around enforcement along Blue Hill Avenue, my gosh, trust me, I'm a Blue Hill Ave girl, as much as I don't like traveling down Blue Hill Avenue, but we are having extensive conversations about enforcement. Totally agree with you there. Thank you, sir.
Excellent. Sorry, folks, I'm trying to keep up with the chat, but also trying to be present and listen. I'm going to, Emmanuel, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yes, thank you. My name is Emmanuel DeBarros. I live in Charlestown and work in currently in Roxbury. I work at ACE, Alternative for Community Environment. I'm the Director of Development and Community Engagement. I would just like to be make sure they're like the crew and everybody here who's on this meeting to be aware of all the projects that are in between Blue Hill Ave. There's Franklin Park and also other projects connecting it, but also how Blue Hill Ave is connecting to many other stations such as the Fairmont Line, Ashmart, and also if you think of Mattapan Square when it comes to the trolley. But also during this time, there's a few bills that connect to improving these rails to make it more efficiently. So this will make it more people get around more efficient. So think of those rails, but also what Andrew was talking about is the MBTA redesign project. Soon this week, there's a meeting coming up for the redesign project, and it's on the agenda. But also you can hear about the updates as it being around the MBTA and will be occurring with those updates. There's like just a few things I would like people to be aware of. The state bills connecting to the rails, some of the rails that are connecting to Blue Hill Lab, also city projects that are connecting to Blue Hill Lab, but also how people are getting around, and that's all. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Emmanuel, and please feel free to share that information in the chat as well. Anybody else? Yes, Reverend Culpepper, let me ask you to unmute.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And I saw the question about becoming more involved. And when the meetings first started, I saw that there was really only one church, Morning Star, involved in the integral weekly conversation. I want you to add Pleasant Hill to that so that I can be involved and keep folks in the Humboldt area engaged. I know a lot of folks are working from the Humboldt area on that. But I also want to have Pleasant Hill listed as one that's involved in some of the specific conversation that take place during the day, not necessarily just these larger transportation meetings. Because I do have some questions about, we're focused so much on the bus lane. What if we took the bus lane, and I'm just thinking hypothetically, off the table for a minute and just thought about how best to develop Blue Hill Ave to serve in a way that everyone would come out with a win-win. Because it seems like everything is so focused on the bus lane, the bus lane, the bus lane, the bus lane. What about coming up with what's in the best interest? And it may not be the bus lane, but if there's not as much focus on the bus lane, what's in the best interest of the businesses, the residents that live on Blue Hill Ave, the businesses that are looking for part of the prosperity that Boston is experiencing now. So, I just would like to be part of some of those in-house discussions and just looking at different perspectives. I know Fatima talks about bike lane. I think whatever happens, we should come out with a win-win so that everyone's excited about Blue Hill Ave and are able to walk across the street without worrying about whether they're going to make it to the other side.
I can take this one quickly. I think that's great. We want everybody involved in every way that you feel like you can be. So if you could direct message me with your email address, we will add you to the group that we meet with regularly just to discuss the process. And we also share information before the meetings to get some early feedback as well. That sounds like something you'd like to be a part of. So if you could direct message me your email and contact, and we can make sure we add you to the list.
Yes, and I do want to note too that Reverend Culpepper, I think your framing is really important and something that we're trying to emphasize through this process and orient folks thinking about it this way is, to your point, right, this doesn't have to include center running bus lanes. At the city, we think there are really strong reasons, including the fact that half of people on Blue Hill Avenue during rush hour are on buses that argue for center running bus lanes and the reliability and the frequency that they can provide. And also we are listening, and we want to be open to some of these other solutions you're talking about, and exploring and thinking through with folks, what are the implications of the different choices we can make about how we design our roadways, and not only the impact that has on the road itself and the people who travel it, but the uses along the side. And so it's just as important for us to hear from you. Maybe you don't like the idea of the center running bus lane, but you've always wanted more trees on Blue Hill Avenue, or you've always wanted more benches so that you have more places to rest, or you think that we could be doing better with trash collection, having more trash cans available. Let us know what you do want to see, because that is just as important. And we are collecting all of that. And that is what will help us to help argue for what you want, and funding and administration for what you all would like to see. So Reverend Culpepper, in terms of, are you a good person to reach out to about getting Pleasant Hill Church involved? Yes. Fantastic. Okay. I know that we have your contact information here at the city with our face-to-face liaison, so I'll make sure that we get in touch with you soon. Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Kozu, I will be asking you to unmute. Hi there.
Hi, thank you. We'll continue to help try to get the information out. We did have a number of residents participate, but I think some different questions that need to be raised in addition to what Mr. Elisa raised, is that we have several crowded and congested intersections that are not being addressed. So trying to cross Circuit Road at Franklin Park, Columbia Road, Seaver Street, Warren Street, Washington Street, Geneva Ave, all those. And our part of Blue Avenue from Grove Hall from Franklin Park in is very narrow compared to other parts along Blue Avenue. So we agree that one project, one proposal will not fit all. And I think we just saw that with the fiasco about losing bus stops on Seaver Street at Harold Street, making it significantly harder for folks to access buses because of the poor planning of the center bus lanes on Columbus Ave, and the lack of response and communication with Garrison Trotter Neighborhood Association. I think that we should also note that Warren Street is also only 2 lanes along from Warren Street down to past Boston Latin Academy. And all along that stretch from Warren Street to Blue Avenue, all along the Blue Avenue, there's always been an over concentration of large multi-unit buildings without adequate parking. That's why so many people in Grove Hall are so skeptical that who are you trying to do this for? Are you trying to push people out? Are you trying to gentrify and push people out? Because people have students who go to a variety of different schools. They can't rely on buses. They have to go back and forth. So they do need to rely on cars to a certain extent, and the bus routes do not necessarily travel the routes where their students go to. So at the same time, there's been a significant cutback of bus routes that go, whether it's the 14, whether it's the 45, whether it's the 19, whether it's the 44, that are more convenient for and go the routes where some of these families have to go to. So that's why they have to rely upon their cars. So we'll continue to raise some of these issues, and we'll continue to work as part of this process.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Kozu. We're really excited to have your voice in this process. I hear you that there's a request to talk about light coordination, making sure that our traffic signals are actually coordinated, that people have enough time to cross the street, that we are making adjustments where we can, adding crosswalks where we can, and also that we're continuing to place this project in the larger framework of what people's transportation needs are. Because I appreciate your point that this isn't about any one mode to speak. This is about making sure that people have access to where they need to go, and where they need to get to, and that includes schools and the like. So thank you so much, and we're looking forward to working with you.
Kirsty, I'm happy to talk about some of the concerns around just like reductions in service recently and everything.
Yes.
yeah, Mr. Cozy, thank you for your comment. And just regarding just rollbacks in service for different bus routes, folks might be well aware of this, but I just want to kind of speak some more to some specifics about it. But right now, like I mentioned earlier, our intention is to expand service quite dramatically. Over the next 5 years, we want to increase bus service by 25%. This is part of a larger goal that the T has to really improve bus service and to address some of our service equity issues. That being said, one of our challenges right now that we're facing as an agency, but also this is something that a lot of transit agencies across the country and just different transportation sector workers are facing as well, is that we are losing a lot of bus operators, and we are trying to attract and retain more bus operators in the next few years. That is to say that if you know anyone who would like to be a bus operator, I would love to talk with you and also let you know about some of the opportunities the T has for working as a bus operator. But that's something that we are making an agency effort to address in the next 2 years. We're trying to look at all the different barriers to getting into the bus operator workforce and everything. And if folks have ideas, especially if you work for an institution or if you're connected with services or anything like that, that might be working with folks on job training, we'd love to talk to you too. And just on a second point, Mr. Cozy, I know you brought up the bus stop at Harold and Seaver Street. I did just want to say, I don't mean to get into it right now, but we wanted to apologize, like on behalf of the MBTA, for the issues in the lack of communication regarding that bus stop. And also just want to make clear that that bus stop is back in service as of today. So I'm happy to follow up with you after this just to talk through that as well. So yeah, thanks, Kirsty.
Thank you, Andrew. And I see a question in the chat. Are there any trends or specific areas on Blue Hill Avenue that drive illegal parking? And, are there alternative resources that could address the cause rather than just the result? It's an excellent question and it's great framing. So this is part of why we've committed, in addition to many other reasons, committed to those business surveys, because we want to talk with business owners and employees about, how long are people usually in their store? Where are they getting deliveries? When are they getting deliveries? So that we as the city can look at how we, regulate the curb or sign it. So is it 2-hour parking? Is it pick up drop off? Do we have a loading zone to try to get at some of those underlying issues? So for example, in front of a hair salon, you probably need something like 2-hour parking. A lot of folks are going in there, they're getting extensive services done, they're chatting with folks. Whereas if you have, a takeout restaurant, then maybe it's more appropriate to have 15-minute parking or pickup drop-off zones. So that is absolutely something we'll be looking into and something that we can definitely make sure we include in our general conversations around enforcement. And I see that someone has mentioned Happy Supermarket. We hear that a lot. Thank you for raising it again. So it's exactly situations like that where we're going to be trying to work in a really collaborative and creative way with our business owners, with our Office of Economic Inclusion and Opportunity, and see, what we can do to help alleviate that situation at its core. I'm going to unmute you, Miss Rebecca.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes,
okay, great. Great, thank you. So my name is Rebecca Zlotowicz, and I am newly elected representative Worrell's legislative aide. I wanted to come on here and firstly thank everyone who came on and share their opinions. We obviously have a district who really wants to be involved in making their community a better, safer place to live. So thank you to everyone who hopped on this meeting. So one question I do have is, do we know how many cyclists are currently using the route and what in the future that will look like with these changes, and also the safety of those cyclists, and then also just the demographics of the neighborhood that this bus line will go through, so how many households is this affecting? are children going to be, you know, on the streets during this, and how many, and just kind of, do we know exactly what the neighborhood looks like for this project so that we can anticipate any issues or mitigate anything that could come up?
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Rebecca, and thank you for your question. So there's a couple parts in there. I'm going to try to make sure I address all of it. Please let me know if I don't. First was a question about how many people bike on Blue Hill Avenue today and sort of what that looks like. So I don't know the number off the top of my head, and I want to check that before I say anything. But in terms of how comfortable it is to bike on Blue Hill Avenue, it's not very comfortable and it doesn't feel very safe. So I put a link into the chat of actually an excellent resource created by some of my colleagues here at BTD that's called a bicycle level of traffic stress map. And so it sort of shows you, you know, based on where you're riding, based on the speed of the cars near you, and based on sort of what kind of bike facility you have, how it feels to ride there today. And so one of the things we are looking at through this project is how do we have high quality, safe bike facilities that everybody can use. And so that includes, you know, young people who are learning to ride bikes, you know, not just people who commute, or kind of who we think of as our mega cyclists, so to speak. And we also want to make sure that we're keeping in mind as well that the Neponset River Greenway is an amazing resource for the communities along Blue Hill Avenue, but right now it's hard to access it if your option is biking down Blue Hill Avenue in order to connect to the trail. So these are really important conversations. We're going to be continuing to talk about, you know, what are the options around bikes and around bike lanes and those sorts of things, and make sure we have in-depth discussions on that. I know that can often be a sensitive topic for people, and so we want to have a fuller conversation about that rather than me trying to get through the points right here. In terms of your question about, you know, the folks who live along Blue Hill Avenue, it's a great one. And I think you saw when we had meetings with community leaders, it was really emphasized to us that there are a lot of people who need to be specifically sought out to get their feedback on this. So we do know that there are quite a few kids and young families who live along Blue Hill Avenue, and often those are not the people who have time to come to a meeting like this. So we will be working with our Boston Public School colleagues and also with other groups along the corridor to make sure that we're bringing those voices into this conversation. I know I saw that Senator Miranda mentioned, you know, some of the public housing developments and senior centers. Will also be working with our Boston Housing Authority colleagues, our Disabilities Commission, our Age Strong Commission, to make sure that those voices are being uplifted in these conversations, and that not only that we are going to them, that we are not expecting people to come to us in order to give feedback on that. So hopefully that answers most of your questions. I did want to note that we are just at about time. And I want to end on a note of gratitude. Everybody, thank you so much for your participation in this meeting. It has been great to see people's comments in the chat, for all the questions that were raised here. And I want to thank you all for being part of this. I know that Blue Hill Avenue is such an important place for these communities. It's not just somewhere that people travel. It has so much meaning to people here. And so I just so appreciate that you've taken the time tonight to come and talk about that with us, what your concerns are, what your hopes are for this amazing place called Blue Hill Avenue. And so with that, we will end the meeting. We will make sure to follow up with some information about our upcoming events and with links to this meeting recording. And thank you all and have a good night.